right. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Astrid Arame. Some of you might already know me. For those who don't know me, so I'm a manager of communities here at Communities Building Belonging and Climate Transitions at the Tamarack Institute. And today we'll begin this session first with acknowledging that we're meeting on Indigenous land, and as settlers, this recognition and the contributions of historic importance of Indigenous peoples must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. And as part of our commitment to Canada's truth and reconciliation process, we recognize that the importance of land recognitions is just one small way of demonstrating respect for the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And myself, I'm joining today from a traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. Tiohtià:ke, or otherwise known as Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Actually, I'm just going to go back a slide. I just wanted to take a moment as well, just to acknowledge that it's been such a difficult year, I think, for so many people in so many communities, especially thinking about British Columbia, Alberta, Northwest Territories, Nova Scotia, Quebec. The wildfires, the floods, the loss of human lives, homes, animals, biodiversity. And, you know, I think the resources have been stretched thin, and I think it's been never more important for us to find ways for communities to take as much agency as possible to help prepare and support one another for times of crisis. So thank you for being here. Just in case you have any troubles with the technicals, just let me know. I am manning this session on my own, so I'll do my best to help. If there's a problem, just like let me know. You might have to just like flag instead of chat. I might just tell me if there's something not working. As always, we're recording this, and so we'll share the recording afterwards and the slides and all the links and everything. And if you want to share any comments, feel free to use the chat box as well. And I'm just saying as well, love, so we're not like too big of a group today. So let's just take a moment as well, just to get to know each other. So if you feel comfortable, please come on camera and come off mute, and we'll just do like a quick, like a round table of like who you are, you know, if you're affiliated in any organization or group, and where you're calling in from, if you can just share, and then so we get to know each other a little bit. So I'll start with you, Heather, and then when you're finished, then just like pass it on to another person.
Sounds good. Hi everyone. I'm calling in from Treaty 6 territory, which is at the city of Edmonton. And at the city, I live Change for Climate, which is a public-facing information education program to encourage citizens to take action for climate change. And I also lead and have recently implemented a Neighboring for Climate program, which is there to support citizens in getting to know their neighbors. So at times of crisis and bad weather events and so on, they know who to rely on and how to prepare for climate related events in advance. And I see Scott Zayak on my screen, so I'm passing it over to you, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Heather. My name's Scott Zayak. I'm calling in from the Wet'suwet'en territory in Burns Lake, British Columbia. I have two hats on, well, three hats if you include my toque, but I work for two nonprofits, The Link, which we provide a range of community services, including food bank, prenatal nutrition program, a daycare, and other some seniors programming and outreach supports. And then my other hat is with the Chinook Emergency Response Society, which is a community-based society that works kind of at a neighborhood level to prepare and respond to emergencies. So thank you for inviting me, and I'll pass on to Lou.
Me? Oh, thanks. Luke Foster. I'm with Ottawa Public Health. Sorry, I dropped off and then jumped back on. So I think it's just a quick introduction. Astrid, if I'm right?
Yes, we're just saying
Yes.
hello, who we are and where we're, you know, if you're affiliated with an organization or a group and whatnot, and then and where you're calling in from.
Yeah, so calling in from the lovely south end of Ottawa, the Unceded Algonquin territory, with Ottawa Public Health, the emergency management team. So here with Katrina Coder as well. I'm not sure if Katrina's introduced herself yet.
I
Now
have
go
not.
to pass on. Yeah, so you can pass on to.
Thank you for that pass on, Luke. Last time we did this, all of my colleagues forgot me. But anyway, I'm not bitter. My name is Katrina. I'm a nursing project officer with Ottawa Public Health Emergency Management Program. And I've also, yay, just submitted my master's thesis for evaluation. And what I was looking at there was how public health units can promote health equity throughout the emergency management cycle. So it comes really, you know, kind of close into what we're discussing here. My work within Ottawa Public Health right now is trying to work with communities to build, sustain, and maintain relationships and networks so that folks are ready to provide support for each other before, during, and after emergencies. And hopefully that will build some resilience. All right, I see all people that have talked. Amy, if you can join. I don't know if you can, you were having issues earlier, sorry.
I'm so sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy. I'm from Centertown Community Health Center here in Ottawa, also located on the Algonquin Anishinaabe, unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. So I am a community developer here, and we are looking to, based in Centertown, there's a lot of different situations and scenarios that go on where emergencies and first responders are constantly coming to our center in our local neighborhood. So we're looking at working with the city in terms of applying for the alternate response to mental health crisis. So we're really looking to build those networks, or those post-incident networks, and to prepare and to see how we can best support our community when in terms of crisis and when things happen. So thanks, everyone. And I'll pass it to Ksenia. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that right.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. My name is Ksenia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from stolen lands of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples of Vancouver, BC. Also wearing many hats, and two of them is grassroots organizer. So coming from the people, good neighbor, block connector program, and community action network. So it's neighbors helping neighbors, connecting with each other, and emergency preparedness is a big focus for this year. And tonight we have emergency preparedness workshop actually to share with community. And my second hat is a local neighborhood house where as well supporting community and emergency preparedness is a big element of that. And I'll pass it on to William. And cannot hear you even though you are unmuted.
Do you want to maybe try earphones, William, and then we'll come back to you. So maybe Henriette, how about you? And then we'll come back to you, William.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Henriette Thompson, she, her pronouns. I live on the Haldeman Tract, the Grand River watershed, the land of the Six Nations of the Grand River in the city of Waterloo. I've long had an interest in active involvement in churches and faith communities more broadly. And I've had a long-held interest actually in both the practice and the potential of faith communities being actively involved in emergency response. So I'm a frequent participant in these workshops. I'm grateful to the Tamarack Institute for hosting them. And I am deeply involved in hearing and learning about how we can collaborate. Thank you. And I would like to pass it along to Chris.
Hello, everyone. And that's wonderful, Henriette, because I am also on the unceded lands of the Haudenosaunee people. Although further south and east, although I grew up in Guelph, I actually am now in Paul Smith's, New York, about an hour south of Cornwall. And I currently teach disaster management at a school, Paul Smith's College, where I also focus on community collaboration and community-based preparedness and risk reduction. Let us see, it looks like Lou, I think you got passed over, so we'll come back to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lou, calling in from Treaty 7 territory, home of the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina Nations, and Stoney Nakoda Nations. I work for the town of Canmore in family and community support services. I coordinate seniors programs, but I'm also part of the emergency social services leadership team. So responding to the people part of emergencies, and also, you know, when the emergencies aren't happening, working on emergency preparedness. So yeah, thanks for having me. Oh, gotta pass it along. I'm not sure who hasn't introduced themselves yet.
So we have Kim, and we have William, and we have Manira and Grael.
Ken? How about Ken?
And yeah, I don't see the rest right now on my screen. Go ahead.
My name is Kim. I am here working with Dementia Network Calgary. Also volunteer with the Red Cross Disaster and Emergency Program. Even though I'm working in Calgary, today I am joining you from Victoria, BC, traditional territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanich people. And yeah, I'm interested in supporting people with I guess older adults, particularly caregivers, people living with dementia, and kind of building that zero responder mentality of your neighbors and are going to be the first ones there to help you. So how can we help make those connections happen? And I'll just stick a plug in here. We're having a Tamarack presentation on CORE Alberta on November the 9th with Heather Keem, and she's going to kind of talk about that zero responder, building connection and community stuff. So I'll stick the link to there in that chat if that's okay.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'll pass it on to Jeriel.
Hi everyone, my name is Hergel. I recently joined the Miami Foundation as Collective Impact Senior Manager. I work closely with my colleagues Nikisha Williams and Faith Grant, and I am calling from the territory that we now know as South Florida, which has been traditional homeland to the Native nations of the Tequesta, the Calusa, the Seminole, and the Miccosukee. And I'll pass it over to, I lost track. I think Amanda is joining right now.
I think we have Amanda, and we'll try William you and see if your mic works. Yeah, Amanda just joined us. And we have Manira as well. Oh, maybe actually we can go to Manira because I see Amanda is connecting.
Yeah, that's okay. I can jump in. Sorry, apologies. I just moved into a new unit, so my internet is very choppy. That's why I don't want to risk it by turning on my camera. But my name is Manira. I am calling in from the Canadian Red Cross for, I'm the mental health psychosocial support specialist for the Friendly Calls program, specifically supporting the British Columbia and Yukon region. I'm currently calling in from Edmonton, located within Treaty 6 territory and within the Métis homelands and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. Supporting the friendly calls. So what we do for the team is we check in with regular phone calls for participants. We pair participants with volunteers and get them to support with providing emotional support, encouraging healthy coping strategies, and share well-being resources and community connections to other existing services as needed. So essentially we are a sort of like a check and call in between other health support programs that participants are involved with, sort of bridging the gap. And that's everything we do here. I'll pass it to.
Let's try. I think we have William, and I think we lost Amanda. So we'll try you, William.
Sounds good. I'll pass it to you, William.
Oh, we can still hear you. Oh, do you want to just put put in your, oh, perfect. You put it in the chat. Okay. All right. I think we've gone around the table. And then hopefully Amanda's able to join us as well, rejoin us. So it's so wonderful to hear about who you are and what you do. It's so cool. So thanks so much for taking the time. And we've sort of found as well that I think it's important to make the time to do this. So yeah, it's a lot more, makes it a lot more real and more lively. So today we have quite a lot to get through. I don't know if we're going to get through all of it. So hopefully we will get through most of it. What I wanted to do today is to touch down on some principles of ABCD, because like in every session, we're going to start with a kind of like the grounding of the ABCD, because this is what this community of practice is all about, is how do we tie this to ABCD, which is asset-based community development or strength-based community development. We'll talk about collaboration spectrum. We talk about centering equity when you think about forming your collaborations. We'll talk about models for community change, the 2, 4 with a by, structures for collaboration, and a little bit touching on the collective impact, because this is what we do here at Tamarack. And wanted to share 10 really good resilience practices. This is more in a sense for not resilience as in resilience planning for communities, but more resilience practices for collaboratives. And then going into how to get started. So that's the plan for today. Okay, so in the asset-based community development, we really talk about, what are these 6 essential blocks in the community. So we have contributions of local residents, we have the resources of our local associations, we have the support of our local institutions. So that includes public health, it includes the municipality, it includes the agencies and so on. We have the neighborhoods built in natural environment, right? It includes trees, it includes the lake, the rivers, and so on. But it also includes the hazards. So it's those of you who were with us for the session that we did with the Preparing Our Home, and we had, in the presentation, they shared how they had youth in their Indigenous communities identify hazards, things even like, dangerous dogs. These are all really important things to know when, let's say, when you need to evacuate. Also, local businesses, really important. And then finally, the local stories, the heritage and knowledge and cultures that exists within the community about the place itself. So really important. So just wanted to sort of bring us back to and ground us in this. And as I mentioned, so this community of practice is focused on using asset-based community development and collective impact approaches, like together, like interlinked, for community resilience and emergency preparedness. So Zita Cobb from Shawfast and Fogo Island, Newfoundland, once said that in reference to community economic development and referencing ABCD, is that nobody ever built anything based on what they did not have or did not know. And I think the same can be said for emergency preparedness in our communities. So we cannot be well prepared if we don't know what our local assets are, what our local hazards are, what our resources are, and we cannot prepare and help one another if we are not connected to one another. So also talking about a little bit touching on the principles of ABCD. So we always start with everybody has gifts, everybody has something to contribute, right? Relationships build community. So people must be connected for sustainable development. We need to know each other, right? We need to be in relationship with one another, tangled somehow. Residents are at the center. So residents has to be viewed, we have to view them as actors and not just recipients of services. Leaders involve others, and the strength comes from a broad base of community action. And people care, we think sometimes that, people don't care and there's a lot of apathy, but no, actually people do care, but we have to listen, and we have to pay attention. So speaking about listening, so decisions should be made from conversations, right? But people have truly heard. And finally, ask questions, generate ideas, and find out what people think based on what they know and what they have, and what their skills are. You'd be, communities have a lot of the answers that sometimes I'll be looking for. The ABCD questions that we ask, and this is something that I like to touch on quite a lot, it's very simple. What do we know? What do we have? What do we love? And what do we miss? So what do we know? In terms of emergency preparedness, it's the knowledge and the tools to survive, knowledge about the nature, about the place, things like, oh, well, it always, I don't know, there's let's say there's always this river that freezes in this place at this time of the year, or there is something that happens in this place that it has happened for the longest time in the memory of the community, things like that. Also knowledge about, well, how to prepare wild foods, how to also how to perhaps give CPR. All these things, people have gifts, but also there's knowledge about the place itself. What do we have in the community? Thinking about, especially in this framework, about the adaptive and responsive capacity of strengths and assets of a place, but also the strong social connectedness, the social fabric of the infrastructure, however you want to call it. Really important, because you can't really do anything if we are not connected. What do we love? So, what is precious in our communities, our people, our animals, our homes, and what is it that we miss? And that is more like, in this context, we think about, what do we need? What do we need as people and community? What resources do we need? What supports do we need? What infrastructure do we need? So this is really the just keeping all of that in mind as we go into thinking about the structures for collaborations and so on. So I wanted to share as well. So Tamarack recently not this, but there's another guide that recently just came out, but Tamarack has put together this something's called collaboration spectrum. Maybe some of you have seen this. So collaboration is not a single action, right? So it encompasses the many ways in which partners show up and contribute to community change efforts. So we developed this collaboration spectrum tool to build and share understanding about the shared options and experiences for collaboration. Bearing in mind that it can be helpful for collaborative partners to identify the nature of their collaboration and what is it that what you're trying to do, right? I'm going to put the link to the tool in the chat box, but essentially, if we just sort of take a moment to look at this, so as you see, so you have on one side, you have you're looking at the turf as in really the level of trust and who's in the space. So on one side you have the turf, kind of more the competitiveness, and on the other end of the spectrum you have the trust, right? And more tightly we work together in more integrated ways, different actors in the community, and that includes the community members who work together and agencies and so on, the higher the trust and tighter the collaboration in the community. So, and as you can see, so you could go from the really starting from this more of a competing kind of setting where there is sort of every agency and group or organizations is working on their own in their silo. We apply for funding, we compete for clients and so on, and also for public attention and so forth. Then the next stage is like, well, coexisting. Okay, well, there's no really systemic connection between the two. We're not really doing anything together. Then moving further from that is that when there is some communication that is happening between you, there is some information sharing, there is some networking that's happening. Moving on from there is cooperating. And it's like as needed, right? As needed. Sometimes it's almost like kind of when you're having to work with an organization, that's how it's kind of perceived. And then as we see like as the trust and relationships increase, we see that we're moving on to more coordinating, collaborating, and finally integrating our ways of working, and really that stage of getting to collaborate and integrate our efforts so that our efforts are mutually reinforcing and supporting what we're trying to do in the community. So this is what collective impact is all about. And it can sometimes mean as well that we do, there are projects that are done together where there's funding is shared between different partners and so on. So it's just something really interesting. So yeah, so you can take a look at the tool to keep this in mind, and I'm sure for many of you it rings a bell, like as to what you have seen or what currently exists in your community. Also wanted to touch on the principles of always centering equity in everything that we do in community. And that goes to also for as we form any types of collaborative groups. So we have to make sure that we ground our work in the data and the context, and make sure that we are targeting the right solutions. And then thinking about focusing on a systems change, as well as the programs and services, because we want to try and shift whatever it is that is systemically wrong in the community. That also means shifting the power. Does that mean as well that it might mean also that you give up your seat at the table, perhaps for someone else? And understanding the power that perhaps a person holds, has been holding in the community, or what an organization holds in the community. Listening and acting with the community, and build equity in leadership and accountability as well. So next, I'd like to share with you, I don't know if some of you might know, I think Xenia, you probably know this, is to talk about the models of community change, and the one that we use and we talk about a lot here, Tamarack, is the 2, 4, with, by model. And so just understanding, so the 2 model is the kind of like the medical model, is like everything is done to us and without us. And sometimes it is, certain models are appropriate for certain situations. But I guess I think when we're trying to move the community and come together and make some changes so that we can be more resilient or have a local strategy and so on, we need to really think about, well, what is it? What kind of models currently exist in a community? So that's what we're going to always come back to this and think about that. So the other is the 4, when everything is done for us and without us, which is more kind of like the charity model. Then what we try and push our communities towards is the with and the by. So nothing for us, about us, without us, and by us and for us. So I think for emergency preparedness or response, it can't obviously all be by us, for us necessarily, but I think we are very much the mix of the 2, of the with and by, where we should be looking at. So, and I think much of the current emergency preparedness communities tends to be the 2 and 4 model, where, people are sort of waiting to be saved and so on. And then this what we're trying to do here is try and see like, well, what ways can the community, what role can the community play, and how can the community take agency in this and helping to prepare and being able to also then respond better and look out for one another better. So I guess like what I wanted to then touch on as well is moving on from this, the questions that we like to ask is, so what can we do about it together? So remembering those other questions. So what do we have? What do we know? What do we love? And what do we miss? Having all of those things, that knowledge about the community, about the people, about the resources, about the strengths. So what can we do about it together? And this model, we really think about like, well, what can we do as a community for ourselves first? So, and these are just great questions. Let's say if you wanted to do a workshop, or if you're in a community, let's say like a resilience workshop or community emergency preparedness, let's say conversation. So these are some of the questions you could ask, right? So to say, well, what do we need? So knowing, having answered those other questions first. So, well, what can we do for ourselves first? What is it that we need outside support with? And what do we then finally need the outside agencies to do for us? Is there a road that is not, is there an additional exit route out of the community that's currently blocked that needs to be unblocked? Is there some other things that we need? Is there a more culturally appropriate place where people can, when people can be evacuated to? Is there a different way of doing things? All these things. What types of collaboration structures do we need so that we can self-organize and best coordinate with agencies? So these are some of these questions. And then think about, well, what sort of model of change is currently happening in your community, and is this the right one? And then if it's not, then what should be the most appropriate mode of change that meets the needs of the residents and helps connect and mobilize people, right? So that's something that I'm gonna leave you with on this one. So I think we'll now move on to talking about collective impact. And as I mentioned, we kind of use the two very much in an intertwined way. We like to keep in mind that there are 5 conditions of collective impact, which I wanted to share with you. So there has to be a common agenda. So as a community, as a group, we have to come together on a shared, whether it's air quality, whether it's emergency preparedness, whether it's for fire prevention, whether it's for for any kind of future evacuations or response in general, whatever it might be, or for climate action, it could be many things. We agree on some shared ways of measuring the effectiveness of what we're doing together, right? And there have to be mutually reinforcing activities. So what I mentioned before in the collaboration spectrum, so when we work in an integrated way, there are mutually reinforcing different activities that work together in concert. So instead of there being this twice of the same thing and somewhere else being a gap instead. There has to be continuous communication that happens with the community, but also within the group as well. And finally, a backbone support. And this means, and it, we have this as one of the points, but we also sometimes see that we have community groups that don't necessarily form a backbone organization, like an organization itself and with a backbone to support it. But depending on what you do, and this is very broad, is the whole collective impact model overall, it might be necessary, but it might also be possible to go without it, but I just wanted to mention it. So it's really having an organization that takes on the administrative and funding, being able to accept funding and things like that role for the collaborative group that you would, let's say, have in the community, if you so decide to do. And I'm going to as well share with you before I go into the 10 really good resilience practices. So I'm going to share with the tool about an article about the collective impact. And then Tamara just recently released a 10 guide. So we often release these, it's called 10 guides. It's like 10 good ideas, 10 good examples, and so on. It's called a 10 guide on building sustainable resilient collaborations. And in there, I'm going to also share a link for that. And you'll see it's really, really informative. And so I do encourage you to read this. What I thought I'd share in today's session is that there are 10 really good resilience practices. And this is really in the sense of the collaboration itself. Factors to think about, okay? So we spoke about embedding equity, think about equity and inclusion into the design. We spoke about relationships, so it's also important between the partners themselves. So thinking about that collaboration spectrum continuum is that trust, that higher trust. And this is something that gets built over time, and this doesn't just happen overnight. There has to be broad community engagement. So these are all the things that really matter. There have to be some, adequate human and financial resources to sustain the work, and the partners willing to contribute to shared outcomes. So mentioning that's the common agenda, right? There has to be some compelling cases that drive this work, and we have to always stop and do some sense making, right, and reflect and learn what is it, okay, we tried this and this, this didn't work. Okay, this was the feedback that we received, and can we improve in the future. We have to have some data to back up as evidence and to inform our approaches. We have to find some way to also tracking, what progress are we making? What is the difference that we're making, right? And is there also an opportunity to influence policy and system change? So how do we, how is, for example, how are communities preparing for emergencies overall? Are we waiting for agencies to do it for us, or are agencies doing it with us? Are we doing it with agencies rather? And how is that embedded into policies and ways of working? So I think there's a lot to be thought about here. And I mean, like these tools in this, when you look at the 5 conditions, collective impact and so on, it might seem like quite taunting. Maybe if you think, okay, well, my community is only small or whatnot. But I think if we unpack these a little bit and see this just as a different type of structure for collaboration in the community, so it's just that follows these principles. So you can look at some of the things that you've heard today and perhaps do some reading afterwards and see what pieces are useful and helpful for you, and keep that in mind, and that can perhaps help inform and guide some of the work that you want to do in the community. And you'll be much closer to ultimately to the kind of coordinated collaboration that is done by and with and by the community, rather than to and for. And we need the wisdom and perspectives of many, to understand, what are the systemic issues and barriers that exist in the community, and how do we address them? How do we plan for uncertainty? How do we plan for crisis? How do we, do that? And how do we develop collaborative strategies together so that we can challenge what has perhaps been longstanding inequalities and so on, and how can we build better features moving forward? So so from this, I see we have some time. That's good. And if we have time, we'll have a discussion as well. So I thought I put together a little bit of a sort of a starting piece on how would you begin? Thinking about all this theory, thinking about ABCD, thinking about the collective impact, thinking about the models for change. So we have in our previous sessions covered the community mapping piece already. So, but before we get to mapping, there are other steps as well. And really, if you think about just like the forming of the groups part, I'm going to walk you through some of these steps. So, a first kind of step in doing anything really is a reflection piece, but also a community scan step is really because we need to find out, well, is there will and is there capacity in the community, right? So we need to talk to the residents, you know, people in a neighborhood. We need to talk to associations. We need to talk to groups and just to find out, like, you know, what is the scale of the possible sort of support for coming together for emergency preparedness or for you know, maybe more narrowed targeted thing, whether it's air quality or something else, or let's say fire prevention. You know, how will, you know, what's the will? And just to get a bit of a lay of the land really and get an understanding and just to see what support there is for that in the community, and also at the same time find, you know, identify any potential champions. Is there anybody that you talk to who is, you know, really, you know, you see that they're, you know, their eyes lit up and they're really passionate and really care about this and they want to do something about it. And, you know, also, yeah, is there capacity? Well, who could take it on? Like, is, you know, what else, what other resources could possibly be needed for this? And then I guess it's the moment of catalyst, right? So it's like, well, you know, maybe we've all been thinking about it, you know, for a while, and you know, like, well, but when is it, what happens when we can finally like actually kind of spring into action? So and I guess the point of that is, you know, do people care enough to act upon it? So and what is the urgency? You know, what is the urgency and in the community to the issue, and what would be the consequences of inaction? So that is, you know, but you need to understand that readiness in the community to do this work, right? So if you determine that there is, you know, there is will, there is some capacity, people care, and there's some people willing to come forward and work together, and then the next step really would be forming the leadership team. And we recommend that if you're able to include your municipality in this, if you're able to include folks from the agencies in this, and this is this kind of like this starting point of really creating a like this cross-sector collaboration where you have different groups coming together, where you have residents working with also with other sectors. You need to make sure as well, what about the people who are you know, who are living the experience of climate change, you know, who are perhaps some, you know, somebody living in a community perhaps closer to the edge of the tree line might be having a different reality compared to somebody who is in a different location in the town. Also thinking about, you know, other social determinants and so on. So like the living experience of also of youth, of older adults, thinking about, you know, not everybody has the same means, and I think that something that was said in the session that we had with the folks from Preparing Our Home also is that, you know, our sort of typical mindset of an emergency preparedness or programming is for you know, for a family of 4 that has an SUV that can get away and has a to-go kit and can go into a hotel or can buy air conditioning machines and has the resources and the means to respond, but most people are not in that position. So it's really important to actually include, if you can, in your search for champions, if there's people in the community that are from, you know, have a different living experience or lived experience, bring them in, invite them into this group, make the seat free, give up your seat if you get. So, and within this leadership team, you could also have groups that are interested in maybe working on a more specific sub area, but the main goal is really to have a one leadership team that comes together. And On the note, though, of the bringing in people with living experience too, is beware of the burden that you're asking of those who have less power and less resources to take action. So apply that justice and equity lens to this work, and if you can, compensate community contributions whenever it's possible. Finally, so after that, you would need to think about also, well, how do we organize ourselves? So, and then this is the thought about, well, what sort of structure do we use? But there has to be some agreement on that. There has to be some agreement of roles. There has to be somebody who is the lead within the group. It doesn't mean that they are vetoing the decision. It is just very important to have that. And being a lead in a group, in the team, it comes with its own burdens and responsibilities, but it is necessary for it to work. As I mentioned, so if the group decides that, okay, we also need funding for what we're doing and so on, if we want to make this sustainable, so that's where the backbone comes in. So, it's not necessarily needed to create an organization just for this. You can just find a community partner who can be a partner perhaps in the team, but who has the function of being the financial and administrative backbone, meaning that they're the recipient of any funding from agencies or from public health or so on. It just serves a very useful role. I'll share with you as well, we have this resource on 5 steps for building strong and sustainable groups. This might be helpful. I'm going to take a look. And as you're sort of forming the team, we often use this give and gets tool as well, which is super helpful. Moving on from that, you have to do some engagement in community because yes, you have done the scan, you have identified some champions, but what about the community at large? So do we have the community support, right? And also engaging them to perhaps come together for maybe resilience planning sessions, for workshops that Xenia's organizing tonight, where she is, for example. Maybe holding some listening conversations, especially, let's say, if you think as well, how high is the trust in your community? Because if there is a little trust in agencies, maybe you need to start with listening conversations first. So you need to sit down and listen to what people have to say and build those relationships before you can move on to any kind of action together and get the community involved. And then finally, I wanted to, the final step here is think about connectors and think about leaders. I touched on leaders a little bit, but I want to talk about connectors. And I think maybe connectors might be something that not everybody is aware of, but this is something that we talk about a lot at building communities, building belonging. So who are connectors? So connectors are actually our trusted, they are our neighbors. But they are people that have a gift for connecting with others, essentially. They are trusted by the neighbors, they are friendly, they're curious, they're social, they're gift-minded. So they are naturally skilled at identifying other people's gifts and skills, and they know who has what and how to bring people together. If you think of the people that in your on your block or in your neighborhood, I'm sure you can think of some connectors. Maybe you're a connector yourself because you're here. So they care about their neighborhoods and others' well-being, really important. And they care about the commons. So it's something shared in the community, in the neighborhood, which is something really, really important. So it's the common good, right? They are willing to act for the common good. And why are connectors so important? Because connectors, they are the ones who welcome the strangers at the edge of every community, right? So they are the key to building belonging and inclusion actually in communities. So they'll invite the person that, perhaps nobody else would have. They'll talk to the person that perhaps kind of that stands on the sidelines. They'll say hello to a new person who moves into the community. And connectors, and overall a strong social web of connected and caring residents. So they ensure that critical messages, if you think about times of crisis, they flow both ways, right? Both for resourcing and for resources. So from the emergency preparedness and response perspective, connectors are really key. So we need to know who our connectors are in our community, right? And their primary goal is to connect with others. And they are like the activators in the community. And if you think about, if you bring together the connectors, different connectors from different neighborhoods, you can actually connect the community as a whole. So it's quite powerful. But what I mentioned before is you have to be mindful that connectors are not superheroes. Okay, so they love doing what they do best, connecting people, getting to know people. But they may not necessarily be willing to take a lead on the issues. They might, but they may not. Okay, so don't assume that that they would. So that's why it's important to also have people that are willing to take leadership, because we need both, essentially. I think we're sort of a bit short on the time. I had this video, so you know what I'm going to do? I will share this video because I think we might not have enough time. Actually, no, I think we might just have a little bit, so I'm going to just go forward. Let me just, I think we are about around here. So this is Cormac Russell. So he's someone well known for asset-based community development, and he's talking about finding connectors. And I think just shorten this a little bit. We just go past the intro part.
Or you're a practitioner trying to serve the neighborhood, is beginning to support the convening of what we call a community connector table or circle. In every community, as John said in the last webinar, there are connectors. And I think connectors, as distinct from maybe leaders or networkers, are people who are incredibly inspired by the prospect of connecting people who haven't been connected by their gifts. And I think critically are able to step back and leave those people take action of their own accord. So one of the things about starting the work of community building is how do we ensure that it's owned from the outset by the community? I think the idea of inviting community connectors, many of whom know 80 to 100 people, is really powerful. And I want to give you just an example by way of story as to how this might work. So not far from where I am right now in Liverpool is another very major city called Birmingham. And in Birmingham, one of the neighborhoods that we've worked in is a place called Hodge Hill. And very quickly, just to give you an illustration of how a practitioner might work to convene a community connector circle, the practitioner in this instance was a faith leader. His name is Al Barrett. And Al was living in the neighborhood. The first thing he did was he worked together with 7 local residents. Now remember, because he's living in the neighborhood, he's a near neighbor, as distinct from a salaried stranger. So he's living and embedded in the neighborhood. And his faith community, in a sense, is the embedded intermediary. It's the anchor in that neighborhood. So even when money and resource comes in from outside, the commitment is there to be in a multi-generational relationship with the neighborhood. The first thing he did with 7 of his local neighbors was to begin a conversation. And the conversation they began was a conversation based around a question. And the question was, who are the unsung heroes in this neighborhood? And he was very clear in saying, we're not looking for leaders who stand at the front of the room or who chair meetings. We're really keen to find people who maybe are behind the scenes, who perhaps never come to meetings. And if they do come, they're more likely to be handing out cake in the middle of the room than they are to be chairing the meeting. Who are they? Those people that seem to have the capacity to connect people in a gentle way and to go at the speed of trust. And they went into the various bumping places and the places where people gathered together, and they had those conversations at 3 a.m. outside the fish and chip shop with young kids. during the knit and natter group with some of the older ladies, and during the repair cafe with some of the older men. They began the conversation about who is holding our community together. And across a number of months, they began to hear multiple rumors about people who were. They identified 93 people who the local residents believed were connectors. And what they then did was they went to each of those 93 people and sat with them in conversation and shared what it was their neighbors had said about them. And after that, invited them to come to a celebration of their contribution. But they asked them if they would bring 4 of their neighbors with them from the streets that they lived in, 4 neighbors that they felt with an invitation might be willing to get more engaged in their community life.
So I think it's just like a really helpful way of just like how it's possible. Yes, and I know we're at the top of the hour, and I was just leaving you all with 2 questions. Who are the unsung heroes in your community, and who is holding your community together? So thank you so much for being here today. I hope it's been helpful. Hope it's been informative. I'm just going to share as well, we have an event coming up with our community climate transitions team on November 14th, 15th. It's a virtual event. We have lots of really awesome speakers there. So if you're interested in joining, please take a look. And we also have, if you have a community who's interested in taking collective climate action, we have a 2024 calls for cohort that is open now. So we're accepting applications until December 1st. So if you know of a community that might be interested in doing this, please do share this. We will share this by email as well. And our next session will be in 2024. Oops. Oops. That was not supposed to happen. Oh, I don't know what's going on with the YouTube. Okay, I'm going to stop. Finally, I just wanted to ask you if you have 2 minutes to share with us your thoughts on today's session, and if there's anything else you want to share. Thank you so much for being here. I wish you all the very, very best, and take good care.